Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to our day two draft recap here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Going to be talking about the Falcons' one selection on day two because they traded up from 46, but they ended up picking up a third rounder as a part of that trade, which ended up being absolutely critical. But funny enough, the Falcons actually didn't even pick at that pick, which was 101. It ended up being 96 because the Falcons traded up again and got perhaps the steal of day two, in my opinion. Which after hearing yesterday, you guys know I don't just praise everything this team does, right? But I will say I do think Xavier Watts, almost into the hundreds, basically, like pick 96, absolute steal. This is a guy that I had extremely high. This is a guy that I frequently said, wow, if he makes it to 46, we should sprint that in because I love this guy. I think he's extremely good. I think he's very underrated. I think he's basically just a hair behind Malachi Starks for me. I think Starks is obviously Malachi Starks, and he's a special player. I think Xavier Watts is just a little bit behind that, but otherwise, my number two safety, a guy that was top 50 on pretty much every board. I know PFF had him all the way at 36. That was pretty close to where I had him as well. So really great pick. I love it. I'm super excited to talk about it. We're going to get to that, talk about some other things on day two, but mostly obviously what happened with the Falcons, where they do pull off a small trade up involving a 2026 day three pick. So nothing, significant to write home about at this time, but really exciting. We're going to dive into Xavier Watts and what he brings and how this whole draft is kind of shaping up now that we've seen day one and two combined, and talk about maybe what we can expect to see from this team on day three, where the Falcons still have two picks, including one we're going to get really early on Saturday, pick 118 in the fourth round. We'll be live once again on our live stream, the Falcoholic Live on YouTube at noon, to bring you guys all of day three for you day three D-gens out there. We love you guys. So come and hang out with us there. But in the meantime, let's get into the Xavier Watts pick real quick. Of course, want to bring you guys a word from our sponsor, as always, BetOnline. Folks, BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting intel. They've got all the latest bets. They're the world's most trusted betting platform. And look, baseball's in full swing. The Braves maybe start to turn around a little bit. We're in the home stretch for NBA and NHL playoffs. BetOnline's got more ways than ever to stay on in the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting options while the games are being played. They've also got UFC esports. They've got props. You could go check it out right now. And when you get bored of that in between games, you get on over to BetOnline's new online casino. They've got all the top Vegas-style games, including poker, live slots, all that good stuff. When you sign up over there, make sure to use our promo code. It's BELIEVE, BLEAV, to get access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. Thanks again to those guys for sponsoring the show. Really appreciate you. All right. I'm coming straight off the draft party. If you guys know, we were live for about 5 hours, so bear with me here. But I wasn't necessarily going to do this show, and I don't always do a day two recap. Usually if the Falcons make multiple picks, I'll do it, or if it's really spicy, I'll do it. This year I felt like I had to do it because I love Xavier Watts, and I couldn't be more excited about a pick. We do see the other guy that I think was going to be a hot, name, right? Jared Wilson, make it all the way to 95. Obviously, I think some people were like, oh, did they get sniped, with Jared Wilson? No, I don't think they were planning to trade up for Jared Wilson, personally. I think it was Watts all the way. I'm sure they would have been happy with Watts as well, with Jared Wilson as well, but I don't think that's what the trade up was for. I think they have a ton of faith in Ryan Newsel, clearly. So, we'll see how that goes down the stretch. But what they do get is a great player, and I think a day one starter in Xavier Watts right off the bat here. And look, anytime you can get a day one starter in the third round, which is something that Fontenot has not accomplished yet, right? We haven't seen that happen. Most of the day two and three picks have been quite questionable. And haven't really lived up to their billing or played. Now, we did see, obviously, Matthew Bergeron. That was a second-round pick, though, notably. The third-rounders, we've seen Zach Harrison play a little bit, but otherwise, it's been a lot of misses there. So, this pick, don't think this one's going to be a miss. Going to come out and say that right now. I think this is an absolute home run. I think maybe teams were scared off by the testing. Watts ran in the 4.5s, mid 4.5s. He had good but not great jumps. I think he's about a 7, RAS. So a good athlete, but not like an elite one. And you guys have heard me say this before, if you heard me talk about prospects on here. I think the 40 in particular for safeties is really overrated. I really don't think it's that important. If you run in the 4.5s, I'm fine with it. Safety is all about instincts. It's all about anticipation. It's all about knowing where the play is going and being in the right place at the right time. And safeties that are, athleticism is obviously nice to have for recovery because you're going to be wrong sometimes. There's all that kind of stuff going on, right? But it's more important to have the instincts. And Xavier Watts is the best ball hawk in college football and has been for multiple years now. I think he has 13 interceptions over the past 2 seasons, 6 in 2024. This is a guy that also forced 5 pass breakups, which as a safety, that may sound like a low number if you've been scouting a lot of corners. Some elite college corners might get double-digit PBUs. It's impressive stuff. But a safety getting 5, 6, PBUs is really impressive because typically you're not playing a lot of man. Well, one thing Xavier Watts can do is play the slot, which he did quite a bit the last 2 years, about 200 slot snaps in the slot over the past, each of the last 2 seasons. He's mostly a safety. I think he's going to play safety in the NFL. I think, again, he's a good but not great athlete at safety, and I think depending on the matchup, asking him to match up with super twitchy slot receivers, he'll be okay, but I don't think you want that. I think that's not necessarily an ideal deployment for him. I think you want him sitting back or sitting in robber coverage or those things and letting him go get the ball, right? Go get the football. He's a ball hawk. You want him doing that stuff. And Watts is just one of the best coverage safeties in the draft. He's just a hair behind Malachi Starks for me. This is a guy, like I said, I think he's got good size, not elite size for safety, but he's right about 6 foot, over 200 pounds. So checks that box. A tad on the older side, right? I think he's 23, but that's not concerning. That's the typical age. Not everyone is going to be 21 years old or 20 years old coming into the draft. And that experience, it shows up on his tape, right? I mean, you can see just how experienced Watts is and that he's got a ton of tape under his belt. And that's helped his game evolve quite a bit, especially over the past season. I think Watts in particular, the one thing that was kind of holding back his projection before this season was he was not the best tackler. That's just straight up what it was. But I think he really improved in that way, and he's physical. And I think that he took a big step there to becoming a good run defender. He still has like a double-digit missed tackle rate. It's only 12%. It's not bad. It's just not good either. You'd like it to be better, but it's still, technically above average. But it was still good. I mean, I think he's got a 79.5 run defense grade on PFF. You love to see it, right? That's a big step, and it's not an elite grade, but it's a very good one. I think he became a better tackler. I think he did take better angles this year. But look, you're drafting Watts because he's an elite coverage safety, not because he's a great, he's not a box guy, right? And the nice thing about Watts is that he and Bates can be pretty interchangeable, and that you can have Watts drop back and play single high, and you could have Bates, who we know can do it all, right? Bates can play closer to the line of scrimmage. He's really good in the box too. He could do all that stuff for you as well. If the Falcons want to switch up their safeties and do some stuff, maybe they want Bates playing closer to the line of scrimmage. Maybe they want Watts and Bates deep, and they want to play a DeMarco Helms or Jordan Fuller as their third, big nickel type of guy against certain formations. And you got 2 guys in cover 2 that are elite coverage guys. It's going to make it really dangerous and really difficult for opponents to throw back there. And, I think the safety need has kind of been underrated by fans. I did a show, I believe with Eric Robinson, earlier this offseason, or maybe it was Adnan. I've done a lot of draft shows. But we talked about the top 5 needs for this football team, the Atlanta Falcons, and the needs that we wanted to address. And safety for me was very high. Slot was very high. But I think safety absolutely is in that range as well, because if you have a weakness at one safety spot and you're playing a lot of cover 2, you're going to have a corner that's going to get hung out to dry. And that's exactly what happened a lot of the time last year, where they had to rely on Richie Grant at safety, and that was a disaster. I mean, we saw how that went. Watts is not that. Watts is far beyond anything Richie Grant ever was as a coverage safety. You don't have to do the projecting. You don't have to hope that Watts is going to be a good coverage player. He's a great coverage player. That's not a question in his game. He's got tremendous instincts. He can play man. He can play zone. Not Malachi Stark's level of athlete, but a good athlete. The only thing is maybe he's not the best run defender, right? I think he's a solid NFL run defending safety. I don't think he's going to cause problems there. He's not going to be this big physical thumper, but he plays with plenty of physicality. I mean, you can see it in his game, but it's just not. It's not going to be his calling card, right? His calling card is going to be picks. And we all know how impactful picks can be, especially if your defense is kind of undermanned. But look what's happening here, right? And we're going to get into this with the other picks they've made. This is a guy that, again, 6 picks, 5 PBUs, allowed a 30.1 passer rating. That's insane. That's an insanely low passer rating for a safety to allow. And PFF is pretty aggressive about dinging you for coverage on plays. Like, even if you're in the area, sometimes they'll just ding you. And they charted him with, a 30.1 passer, and that's 19th best among all players in 2024. So, I mean, really extremely impressive. I love this guy. Like, I was really psyched to have a chance to draft him at 46, but I took him off the board. Like, after the Falcons traded 46, I was like, all right, probably not going to get him. That's fine. I was moving on to Jacob Parrish, who ends up going quite a bit earlier. And, I still love Jacob Parrish. I hate that the Bucs got him, obviously, but look, I think Xavier Watts is a better player. I had him way higher on my board, like 50 slots higher at least. And like, not anything against Parrish or anything like that, but like, I think Watts is going to be a more impactful player for Atlanta. I think he's a perfect fit next to Jesse Bates. And he just elevates the whole secondary to such a degree. I mean, it's a home run for me. I think it helps Mike Hughes a lot outside. I think you feel a lot more comfortable with Hughes and AJ Terrell, that they can play a little bit more aggressive up front because you got 2 great safeties behind him now. I think that your slot is probably going to be whoever it is, maybe D'Alford. Maybe we play a more sane coverage scheme on the back end, and D'Alford can play a little, fit in better to that than what he was being asked to do in Jimmy Lake's scheme, which, let's be honest, was not doing him any favors. I think this is just such a slam dunk for the Falcons. Now, you do have to trade up a little bit, but you give up a future 5th, right? I mean, who cares? It's not a big deal. A 2026 5th, 2026 5th, who cares? It's far away, and I know it's easy to say that now, but like, ultimately, it's not necessary. Like, I don't care. I don't care about that 5th. I think it was worth it to secure a guy that should have been a 2nd round pick at worst, and you get him basically as a 4th rounder at this point. You get him with the last pick of the 3rd round, essentially. Just an absolute steal. I love it. This is a big deal. This is a big pickup for Atlanta, a pick that they desperately needed to make. And now you take this whole draft as a whole, right? Getting more into the meta conversation. And this is, you've got 2 guys that are going to be big time pressure players for you. At least that's the hope. Jalen Walker. I'm Jalen Walker. You guys know I'm most questionable on, but they're going to work out some way that he's going to be, like, Jalen Walker is going to be starting day one. I have no doubt of that. Probably at linebacker, and probably playing, sort of an outside linebacker-ish role, probably dropping down to rush in passing situations, and they're probably going to try to get him as comfortable with playing off ball as they can in training camp, and just have him, sort of line up and rush in obvious passing situations, but or as a blitzer, and just try to cause as much havoc as they can. He's going to be someone that's going to bring pressure from multiple spots. James Pierce is probably going to be their DPR guy on 3rd downs. I wouldn't rule out, honestly, that James Pierce starts, because I think he's a better run defender than people give him credit for. I think he does take that pretty seriously, and I think he's going to work his ass off. I know there's a lot of questions about his attitude and his effort. This team doesn't draft, not since Vic Beasley, right? This team, like, one thing that's been consistent is they draft guys that love football. And I think they believe that Pierce does love football. He's got a weird personality, but I don't think that means he doesn't care, So I think if he's willing to put the work in and keep building out his body, and he did a lot of work on that this year. I think people don't realize, like, he's 250. That's kind of light, right, for an NFL edge rusher, but he was like 240 before. I think he's been working hard. He's only 21 years old. I think he could put 5-10 more pounds on, get up to 260. Now we're talking about a guy that this is legit NFL size that can hold up. I don't think he's ever going to be an elite run defender. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to get crazy here. But I think all he needs to do is be a solid run defender, and he could stay on the field. Now, the Falcons, I think, really want to do a lot of rotating. And you look at this edge room now, and there's like, all of a sudden, there's a bunch of guys here. And they may not be done, right? I think the Falcons love Q Robinson from Alabama. I would not rule out that pick at 118. I think they really like, we could see a D tackle or like a nose tackle. I know Trayshawn's salivating for CJ West, maybe, from our mock draft to the football god's ears, right? If we could get CJ West at 118, that would be total slam dunk. I mean, a total renovation of the front. Really incredible stuff. So, I'm excited for that possibility, certainly. But ultimately, you have to love what this team is doing, finally committing to fixing this defense. And look, like, one way or another, they're taking swings, and they took swings last year, and now this is the time for all of these picks to come together. Like, this is going to be one of the youngest fronts in the NFL. This is exactly what I was saying, last year that they didn't end up doing, but this year they are, right? They're taking all of these young players, they're going to throw them all out there and see who's ready to answer the call and who isn't. Like, who are we, like, what are we doing up front? What are we doing? Who's ready to go? And that obviously worked out really well for the Rams a couple of years ago. I don't know if it's going to work out well for the Falcons. It's pretty bold, to say the least. It's an aggressive strategy. But look, we need Rook. We need Dorless to step up. And maybe we get another D tackle in here in the draft. Maybe the Falcons decide to start getting a little bit more aggressive here, go after some guys that maybe are cut loose after the draft or guys that they've had their eyes on. Maybe after June 1st, they were able to move Kirk. And maybe they're able to maybe they decide to move on from Onyemata. I don't know. Depending on, I think maybe like if they do get like a CJ West, I think it's possible they could just take the cap savings there, or maybe they're hoping for a rebound year from Onyemata, just maybe want him around as a veteran they like. But you look up front and it's like they got Arnold Ebiketie, who people still hate on Ebiketie. I think Ebiketie's absolutely been worth that second rounder. I mean, he hasn't been this huge impact guy, but like I think people put way too high of expectations on second rounders in general. I think he's been a consistent presence. I think he's been asked to do way too much for this team, having to try to carry the load. It's never really been what he is. I think he's always been an edge 2 at best. Maybe an edge 3 is his best role, but he's a solid guy. And I think if he could get into a rotation with guys across from him that are actually legitimate, I think he could be good. I think he has 8-10 sack potential. So maybe we can get him finally coming together. We haven't even seen Braylon Trice play real snaps. So, I mean, he's a total wild card. Who knows if we'll get anything from him or not. But, if you're looking for a bigger end, I know there's been a lot of talk like, oh, are the Falcons just going to have these tiny edge rushers? Like, how's this going to work? No, they have quite a few big ends. I think we're going to see Zach Harrison go back to edge. I think we're going to see Braylon Trice be one of their big ends. Maybe Dorless could kick out and play some 5-tech as well. He's kind of always been that hybrid guy. At least that's what he was in college. You got Rook on the inside, maybe a rookie, nose tackle in CJ West. You got David Onyemata maybe mixing in. They've got some guys I think they like on the interior as potential options there. This defense is starting to, like, you got Jalen Walker to help boost the linebacking core and cause more havoc up front. I mean, the defense is starting to actually resemble something that could be interesting. I think the secondary with AJ Terrell and Mike Hughes is fine. We'll have to see how the slot shakes out. That's one spot. It would be nice to bring in competition, but we may or may not actually get that. But otherwise, I didn't even mention Leonard Floyd, the guy that they just paid $10 million to. Like, Leonard Floyd might be able to actually just be your DPR, like just a guy you could rotate in and keep fresh. He is on the older side now, right? I think it's his age 33 season. He shouldn't really be playing a ton of snaps. But as a guy that maybe you can just bring in on third downs, like Leonard Floyd and James Pierce, like streaking off the edges fresh, like that is terrifying. Like that's a lot of speed. It's a lot of disruption. I think we might have something here. I think we could. Obviously we got a long way to go, but the secondary, if they can, assuming slot is okay, you got 2 great safeties now on the back end, 2 depth safeties that you really like, 2 outside corners in AJ Terrell and Hughes. You love AJ Terrell. Hughes was good last year, and I think he's a kind of a bargain on that $6 million deal. I think he's a good option. Clark Phillips, kind of a wild card. I liked what we saw from Natrone Brooks. Maybe he'll get a shot to compete as well. Obviously linebackers, they spent money on Divine Diablo. We'll see how he factors in. There's Caden Ellis that's going to play. Troy Anderson, total wild card. Like, they have guys now, like interesting guys. And it's kind of like crazy what happens when you add legitimate edge talent to boost this defense up, like how quickly it could come together. And we're still really like waiting, and there's a lot of hoping going on here. So don't get like too high off of this. But I'm starting to see a vision that was not there before. And I'm starting to really like what I'm seeing. It's more than just seeing a vision. It's like I like what I'm seeing. I think we're going all in on these high pressure guys, these speedy guys, athleticism, youth. It's like a total remake. And there is still some veteran presence, which you like to see. We've got veterans at corner. We got veterans in all the groups, right? AK and Floyd on the edge. We got Onyemata. We got, TQ, Morgan Fox, TQ returned. Like, I actually like that. Morgan Fox, these are all good rotational guys. Caden Ellis at linebacker. Like I said, Terrell, Hughes at corner, Jesse Bates at safety, Jordan Fuller's a veteran too. Like, they have veterans there, but they also have youth. I think I'm starting to see a pathway for this defense to actually be not terrible. And if the offense is what people hope, which is kind of what all of our hopes have been pinned on, and we still have to figure out what's going on at center. Seems like they're ready to give this thing to Ryan Newsel. So newsflash, let's go. But I like it, and I think, I love getting Xavier Watts here. That's kind of the biggest takeaway is like, look, if you don't have a lot of picks, you got to nail the ones you have. And they absolutely nailed this pick. Like, you gave up 46 and you got a player I would have happily taken at 46 at 96. And all you had to do is give up a future 5th, which is basically the equivalent of a 6th round pick in this draft, which is, in case you guys aren't keeping track, that's nothing. That's barely anything. It's like 1 or 2 points on the trade scale, right? So easy move, get a guy you love at a slot that's awesome, and maybe solidify an elite safety tandem. And you've already got 2 corners you like. I feel like a broken record here, but this is the first time. Yesterday I was feeling encouraged, but still questioning. And I said it yesterday. I think with them trading the second and trading away that first, it's going to be really critical now what they do with these few picks that they have, because we're going to have, this team needs to win now. Like, they don't need to be a Super Bowl team, but they need to get in the playoffs. They need to get some playoff experience in here for 2026, which is probably the year that they actually want to compete. And we got a real defensive coordinator in the room now, Jeff Ulbrich. They got a defensive line coach that I really do respect, and I think there's a lot of justified hype for it. Nate Ollie, like, I'm starting to like this. They're reeling me back in just when I thought I was out. I'm so in. Like, I'm all the way in on this. I love Watts. They picked the guy that I wanted, that I've been banging the table for. I'm in. I'm all in. I love this. I think this is a great pick. I want to see what happens tomorrow. I think 118 is very important as well. I know it's a 4th round pick, so people will be like, oh, yeah, it's a 4th round. That one is almost as important as this one. Now, it obviously helps that they nailed this pick, but I think they gotta get another impact player. But like, if you do, like, if you come away with CJ West, if you come away with, another guy like that, I think they could possibly go for like a Q Robinson if they're trying to really, David Walker. Maybe there's a corner they love. I know Kobe Bryant's there. He has a lot of fans. We'll see if he makes it. A guy that's kind of under the radar, Robert Longerbeam from Rutgers, kind of a smaller guy, but he's got some upside as a slot corner. Maybe they go, Elijah Huzzy late if they're looking for more of that upside slot guy. I think they can go a lot of different ways there. I like Cameron Jackson if they're looking for more beef at that spot. Obviously, CJ West would be a home run. So, let's pray for that. We're pulling for your hope for your boy there, Trayshawn. But, they're going to have good options at that pick, I think, given what we've seen so far. I'm excited to see what they do. I have a lot of hope now. I feel like I have a lot of hope for the first time in a while. And that's a nice feeling, even if it's short-lived, even if they're probably doomed to let us down because that's just our lot. It's exciting stuff. I'm excited to keep talking about it with you guys. Like I said, we'll be back bright and early on Saturday at noon to take you guys through the third round. All of our day 3 D-Gens, we love you guys. I'll be there with Adnan. We'll have some great guests as well. Should be joined by Joe Patrick. Should have Dave Choate back on. Should have some other guys stopping in as well as they're able. And we really appreciate you guys. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a fun draft, a positive draft. We needed that positivity really bad here, as I'm sure you guys are well aware if you're watching this program. So thank you guys for tuning in. Late edition. I got to get some sleep because we got to get up bright and early for Saturday. But thank you guys for joining the show. Thank you guys for watching, listening. If you haven't done so already, make sure you like and subscribe. Really appreciate that. Leave that 5-star review in your podcast platform of choice. If you want to support the show, you could do so signing up on Patreon for podcast or YouTube for video. Appreciate that as well. Don't forget, giving away 2 NFL Shop gift cards, $50 each, during day 3, 1 for our members and patrons. And yes, if you join between now and the giveaway, you're absolutely eligible as well. And you don't even have to be present. We'll just randomly draw it from one of our active patrons. So that's a good option. But, please join and support because you want to support the show, not for a card. Because the other card is an open drawing to everyone who signs up. All you got to do, subscribe to the channel and join the Falcoholic Discord so we can actually get you your code. Super easy. It's been a lot of fun. We've enjoyed chatting up you guys all weekend. One more day ahead of us. We'll see what this team can pull off. If they can make us even more sold on this class, we can let Terry cook up this 5-course meal for us. But it's been a fun one, guys. We'll see you bright and early on Saturday here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast, Falcoholic Live. I'm Kevin Knight of Falcoholic Kevin. If you need more content before Saturday morning, if you're watching this and you're like, what can I do? You could go watch the day 2 stream if you want. You can also go check out thefalcoholic.com, where we'll have tons of written stuff up about the pick and everything else going on with it from the time this comes out, which will probably be like 1 in the morning, all the way through to the draft. So check that out too. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Thanks again to BetOnline for sponsoring the show. We'll see you next time. Have a great night, folks.